Hello there and welcome to another edition of the Motoring Magazine programme, Four Wheels Good. On today's show, our classic car guru John Stanley casts a critical eye over Renault's unusual Spider, and classic car mechanic Mr John Wright does battle with more mechanical mix-ups in Inside Motors, the series which shows you how to fix your own car. But first, Sam Kenny has been visiting the curious set of the 60s series The Prisoner. But she's not there as a prisoner herself. She's meeting up with the owners of a very different rarity, Volkswagen's Karmann Ghia.
Portmeirion in Gwynedd in North Wales. It's quite famous actually, you might recognise it. It was the location that they used to film The Prisoner. Remember the cult TV series with Patrick McGowan? Well, today we're here to meet another kind of film star, but I'll tell you a bit more about that later. Now, the village was designed and built by Sir William Clough Ellis, and he was a guy who was passionate about style, especially Italian style, as you can see. That's why I think he would have loved this film star. It's a Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, engineered by Germans, but designed with a particularly Italian flavour. It's been in lots of films, that's why I call it a film star. It was in The Rock with Sean Connery, there was one in Sneakers with Robert Redford, and Demi Moore drove one in Now and Then. But we're here today in Portmeirion to talk to the Karmann Ghia Owners Club of Great Britain. So let's find out what they're up to. Sitting beside me here in the Karmann Ghia is Derek Froh, who's the chairman of the Karmann Ghia Owners Club of Great Britain. Derek, how long have you been chairman of the club now?
About 3 years, I think.
Yeah? And how long's the club been in existence?
It started in 1982.
Yeah? And this is presumably your annual get-together.
That's right.
What's brought you to Portmeirion?
Well, we have an annual annual international meeting we call it, every year. And it depends on who's prepared to put it on and where they live. They will do it around their area.
Right, so where have you been in past years?
Well, last year in Essex, Hawkhurst. We've had a couple of years in Bath, we've been in Lincoln, we've been a number of places.
Yeah, and this year you're in Wales.
That's right.
In Portmeirion. It's a very fitting setting for a Karmann Ghia, don't you think?
Very true. It's, the sort of Italian designs of both things are very appropriate.
Yeah. How did you first become involved or interested in Karmann Ghias?
Well, personally, I've always liked air-cooled VWs rather than water-cooled. And one year I saw these cars in a show. They struck me as being particularly beautiful, sort of timeless design, and I thought, right, I'd like to have one. So we worked towards that and went on from there.
And you say it went on from there because you've actually got how many now?
We've now got 3.
Yeah.
Another one which is a convertible, a coupe, and we're restoring a Type 3, which is one with 4 headlights, different profile.
Yeah. Which is your favourite?
Very difficult to say because I think they've all got scoring points. My wife particularly likes coupe as being firm, solid and watertight.
Yeah.
I quite like the convertible as being something you can put the roof down.
Yeah.
And the Type 3 is a bigger.
Okay, we've got William and Jan here from Holland. I'm not even going to try and pronounce your surname. Say it for me.
Sestronk.
Sestronk, was that
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes.
And what was yours?
Keyboard.
Keyboard. Oh, well, I'm doing very well. On to things I know a bit more about. What about your Karmann Ghia? How long have you had this?
About 2.5 years.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And have you done a lot of the restoration yourself?
Not all done by myself, but
Yeah.
few things, little things. The paint I go to somebody else, but yes, I did many things
Yeah.
to make it beautiful, to look it better.
What year does this date from?
1961.
So it's quite an early one.
Quite early.
Yeah.
There is a type before, Only it's difficult to get one because there are less of them.
Yeah, because they said they had 19 years of production, didn't they? They started in
I don't know
1955.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's quite. It's finished in 74. So it's
74,
quite an early
that's
one.
right.
Yeah. What marks it out as different from the early ones? How do you?
The early ones has a little air hole in the front, and this is different.
Yeah.
Smaller.
You've got. I noticed that you've got the domed hubcaps on this model, which are much nicer.
Yeah. It's
aren't
nicer.
they? Yeah.
It's different. The size of the wheels is 1 inch bigger.
Yeah.
And they need another hood on it.
Yeah. And what about the interior? Tell us a bit about that, because it's quite special, isn't it? The way that you've restored it.
Special on the interior is I didn't restore it.
Yeah.
It's original and it is a special color. It is a sea blue color.
Yeah.
It's not white. Mostly they are white or black, but
Yeah.
this is sea blue color. I looked it up. It is an original color.
Right.
First I thought they sprayed it in that
Yeah.
color, but it isn't.
So
It's
you're
original.
delighted to find that
Yeah,
you did
yeah,
have
yeah,
to restore it.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm sitting in John Plater's Karmann Ghia. It's a 1964 model, but I want John to tell me all about the inside. It's a beautiful dash that you've got here on this Karmann Ghia. Have you done a lot to it, John?
Yeah, quite a lot. The whole car has been stripped down and repainted over the years, but they modified the inside a little.
Yeah.
By excluding parts rather than putting them in.
Right.
Just that I prefer the look of the earlier cars, which have got a painted dashboard and dash top.
It's interesting to see this the little radio and things like that. Are they from the original?
It is of the original period, yeah.
Yeah. And the ashtray. The ashtray is
Yeah.
really cute.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. That is. So I suppose it's the detail really that attracts people to them.
Yeah, there's lots of little details.
Yeah. And what about the steering wheel? Is that the original as well?
That's the original, yeah. It is actually the wheel that came with the car, so I'm assuming it's from 1964, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed that yours has got a petrol gauge,
Mhm.
because some of the early ones.
The very early ones, yeah, no,
They
they
didn't?
just had a reserve tap. And you ran out of fuel, flick the tap and carry on,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. But you never really knew how much petrol you had in, so it
No.
was just luck really, rather than judgment. But they all came with the clock on one side and the
and the
speedometer.
speedo at this
I
stage,
noticed that you've added a rev counter down
A rev
there.
counter, yeah.
That's obviously not original, is it?
No, I've got a slightly non-original engine in the back, which
Yeah.
makes it go a little faster. It just keeps me in touch with what's going on behind a bit more.
Yeah. There's remote openings as well for the bonnet, aren't there? Where are they?
Bonnet's just underneath here
Yeah.
by the steering column.
Yeah.
And for the rear lid, which is just down here by the side of the seat.
This is Helmut Meit, who's come all the way from Germany with his Karmann Ghia. It's a 1972 model, is that right?
Quite right, yes.
What were the differences between the later models and the earlier models?
Well, the later models got some modifications in the way that the Type 3, which was a different car made by Volkswagen, had the same rear tail lights, the same bumpers, and you can find the same bumpers on the late Karmann Ghias as well.
Right. Now I know you've made a lot of modifications to your particular car.
Yes, because I didn't like the car as it was in standard.
Yeah.
So I made some modifications which
Yeah.
I liked. Some people don't, but
Yeah.
I paid it and I made it myself, so people should be quiet. I like it.
Yes,
That's
quite.
all, yeah.
Tell them to shut up.
Yeah.
What about the grille at the front? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the grille was an extra you could have from accessory shops. It was never done by Karmann itself, but this is a remake of an original
Yeah.
in brakes.
Yeah.
And somebody made me a mold and made it from aluminium, and I've polished it, and so after polishing it, it was chromed
Yeah.
to avoid corrosion. So
I know you've replaced the badge inside the steering wheel as well, haven't you?
yes,
Yeah.
the steering wheel was made for Karmann, which I knew, but it had a center logo with a blue background and showing a coach in the center.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that this was the first logo Karmann ever had.
Right.
So I threw it away, and after knowing it, so I was a bit sad.
Well, it was bound to happen sooner or later. I knew it. I knew I wouldn't get away with the whole day without it raining. So we're in the rain now. I'm talking to Mark Poulton from Chester, who's your Karmann Ghia is a little bit different from most of the others here today. It's a Type 3.
Type 3, yes. The Germans and Continentals tend to call it a Type 34, but in this country we've reserved the nomenclature of Type 3, just sort of to keep it simple in that sense.
Yeah. What's the difference?
Difference, basically later styling, more American influenced, 4 headlamp front, and basically used the then relatively new Type 3 engine with twin carburetors and a crankshaft mounted cooling fan rather than the upright version as in the Type 1 Karmann Ghia.
Well, these are the last of the Karmann Ghias for today. They're just leaving, and I think it's just about time we did too. As they say on sports programmes, rain stopped play.
A real treat for classic car lovers, Sam Kenny and the Karmann Ghia owners. After the break, John Stanley looks at another possible classic, Renault's powerful, sporty offering, the Spider. And John Wright will be back again to alleviate your motoring misery in Inside Motors. See you then. Welcome back to Four Wheels Good, TV's motoring mecca, dedicated to bringing you the best in vehicular vision. Before the break, we brought you an older classic car that'll turn heads aplenty. Now it's time to introduce you to an up-to-date classic of the future. Renault Spider is one of the most eye-catching cars on the road today, and John Stanley put on racing gear to find whether it's got real racing pedigree or whether it's just a fashion statement.
This little relic from the toy cupboard is a late 1950s Cooper Monaco, which was from an era of sports racing cars which were hugely successful. There was the Lotus 23, there were a number of them that operated both in Europe and in Can-Am in the United States. They didn't really breed any kind of road cars of the time. They were merely race cars that were very efficient. In the meantime, there have been kit car manufacturers and specialists who have created cars for the racing enthusiast, but again, they were not road cars, albeit they were sometimes used on the road. Now, however, they have actually developed a series of cars which are being offered to us, apparently for road work, but which are based on this original model design. The Caterham 21, which as yet I've not driven, seems to be one. The Lotus Elise is certainly an entirely fashionable item, which I have tested, which is fun and very light and flawed. And there is the Renault. And here we've got the Renault Spider, which is their offering for this apparent model market. According to Renault, there are going to be 200 of these available in England and about 80 of them a year. It's a very pretty car. It has the sexy gull-wing doors, which certainly make parking close possible. It has stunning good looks. The back end of this thing causes attention wherever you go. And the seating and the cockpit is big. It is very wide. The seats are Recaro, which are the sort of thing that any enthusiast tries to save up for their car. It is definitely a boulevard puller. It's the sort of car you want in the sunshine, and it's the sort of car you want to be noticed in, and that is certainly what you will achieve. It is a fashion statement. On the other hand, this car is hardly worth the space it's parked on if you want comfort. There is no hood. There is an optional umbrella which apparently will allow you to travel at 20 miles an hour. But on a rainy day like today, you are sunk. There is no heater. There are no sun visors. There's absolutely nothing that your average poser is going to want to enjoy. More especially, there is very little stowage. The space you see here in the front, actually it looks better because we've taken a plastic briefcase with all the tools out so that we can put our own things in. It is not really a very useful car for anybody. If, on the other hand, your love affair is with racing and you want to put these kind of clothes on and compete as an amateur, then a car like this seems screamingly obvious because it does have all the technology that Renault have found out of the race circuits. It has a 2-litre engine, which is basically the Renault Clio Williams. It gives you enormous amount of power. in a very simple structure with rigid framework and an aluminium tub, which is, they spent 4 years creating. It was called the Mosaic Project, and they believe that they have found an incredibly strong structure, which certainly when you're driving it is rigid. You have the rollover bar, you have all the equipment you seem to want if you're going to drive to a circuit, get on the grid, race, and then drive home without a trailer or an escort car. And yet you can't, because if you want to compete, you have to have another Renault, a sports one that is specifically constructed for racing. So this car really seems to be a total waste of space until you drive it. Renault's pretty good at marketing. The Papa and Nicole is something we're all familiar with, and we in the media are even sent postcards from her when they're going to do another campaign. With the Spider, they themselves admit they're not sure who it's for, and so the sort of images they've been presenting to us are wildly romantic and bear nothing to the reality of trying to live with this car under mixed weather conditions and mixed traffic conditions. The cockpit's pretty sparse, as you'd expect, and indeed pretty trendy. You have just one button you can play with, which is this one, which gives you a heated front screen. That is actually all they've got to offer you. The central controls are what you'd want, just the oil, the temperature and a rev gauge. And in the center, you do have a speedo and some kind of a fuel gauge. I haven't actually found a mileometer, although they lay claim to one. And indeed, in the initial brochures, they talked about having a heater, which I also can't find. It's hard to decide really what to make of this car, because actually as a driver's machine it is splendid, but the problem is there's no way it's any use to you. It probably would work as a third car, as a toy, but at £26,500 there are an awful lot of enormously fun cars to drive, and they do have a roof, and they do really have this level of performance, so that it isn't the exclusive preserve of Renault that you can accelerate like this, or that it'll stop, or that it'll look that good. If you go out there in the market, there are a lot of cars for that money, and I'm not sure this one's really worth it.
Thanks there to Classic Car Yearbook author John Stanley, and we shall see John again in the near future. Now we turn our attention to another John, John Wright. He never stops working and showing us how to do our own repairs and services. So with a mechanical cheer, we shout, Inside Motors.
It's a bit unusual actually being able to undo the oil filters by hand. Occasionally you can.
Let's just move that under to catch it. There we go. That's got rid of the old oil filter. We'll just let that drain down while we go and prepare the new one. Okay, go on, we'll have to get up now. Right, to prepare the new oil filter for fitting, take it out of its box, and what we're going to do is pre-fill it a little bit with oil, so when we first start the engine it's not having to drag the oil through the sump and the oil filter to bring up oil pressure. So just leave it like that, and I'll get some oil ready. Into the jug, and we'll
Just put a little bit in this filter. Right, it's about half full. It should be enough for what we want. Now before it finally settles, what I'm doing is just putting a smear around the seal. Just there. That's it. I'm going to get all that down the hole so it doesn't dribble on me. Right, that's ready for fitting now. Go downstairs and get it fitted. Right, just get the rag and wipe round the old filter housing first. This is where the smear of oil becomes very apparent. There we go. So if you don't put it on, what you're in danger of doing is rupturing the seal as you tighten it up. Right, the filter's just contacted the face of the housing and it needs 3/4 of a turn now at least. So we'll go 1/4. Might need 2 hands here. 2. There we are. 3/4 of a turn. And that's on tight. I just wipe round it, and if it is leaking we can tell. Put the old filter in the box, tidy up underneath, and then we'll go and put some oil in the sump. Right, let's get this sump refilled. Oh, that's on a bit tight. 2 hands to that. Got it. Right, just pour that in. This is where the jug comes in really useful. I mean, you can use a funnel and you could do it straight from the can, but you always end up with a big mess. And there are about 2 cars that you can't use funnels on. Rovers are one of them and Volkswagens are the others, because right under the filler cap there's a plate.
Thanks, John. See you in 2 weeks. Next week's show is going to be a bit special. In the past, we've tried to bring you motor racing at the sort of level that the average person could get involved with. Well, we'll be following the fortunes of an ordinary man who goes to work during the week, but at the weekends has managed to find enough sponsorship to really compete in the Formula Ford Racing Championship. See you then.